typical marathon program is anywhere between 6 months to a year. We were doing over 3 marathons within 90 days. 2-time Olympian, Olympic medalist, mother of 2, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And she needed to have 2 or 3 treatments total, something that they couldn't afford to do as a family. And if you want to, raise money, you got to inspire people.
I've done a couple of triathlons recently, and that was a lot. That was nowhere near 125 kilometers. How did you even prepare for something like that? Your coach quit just a few weeks into it when she thought that you weren't going to be able to do it.
I witnessed my wife walk out the door. There was no way that I was gonna shift and quit on this commitment that I made, not only to Krista, but to myself.
Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with the only person to have ever run North America's largest cycling race, the Grand Fondo from Sea to Sky in Vancouver. Matt Christopherson ran 125 kilometers to help save his friend's life. This is truly an inspiring story of a man who said yes from the kindness of his heart to only discover that he was really running for himself. It is a story of inspiration, of overcoming challenges and discovering the true goal of fulfillment. And if you've been listening or watching for a while but haven't subscribed yet, get on it, because the more subscribers and more viewers, the more impact this podcast will make. I do my best to share inspiring stories to reach more people, to show them what's possible when you follow your path to purpose. Matt, you ran 125 kilometers to help save your friend's life. What had you say yes to that?
You know what? Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Zark. It's an honor to sit down with you, tell the story of Project 125. When I heard the call to have the opportunity to run 125 kilometers, 1,900 meters of elevation from Vancouver to Whistler, it was something that I knew it was a calling for me, like a bigger purpose. I believe that God gives us these gifts, and one of those gifts that I have is my health. And so at 43 years old, having the ability to make the impromptu decision to ramp up running and run that distance for a friend to raise money and inspire people was something I felt like I needed to do.
Paint the picture as to what was your friend, Krista, going through that had you feel called to step up.
So Krista, 2-time Olympian, Olympic medalist, mother of 2, 4 and 6-year-old. And we were university friends at Simon Fraser University. Hadn't talked to her or her sisters for nearly 20 years. And I saw on Facebook that she had seemingly dislocated her shoulder, went to the hospital, and only to find out that she had broken her arm and was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She had 6 tumors from her head to her waist, and something that wasn't identified early on. She had, little to no symptoms. And when I saw that, my heart broke. And that's when I reached out to Krista, and, they had initially posted a GoFundMe for $5,000. And the conversation was around, if you want to raise money, there's a lot of cancer stories out there now. Everyone's mom and uncle and aunt and you name it. And if you want to, raise money, you got to inspire people. And so that's what led me to, off the cuff, say, maybe I'll run Vancouver to Whistler. And then it all snowballed from there.
Wow. And you don't typically run 100 kilometers. You're not an ultra marathon.
Yeah, I'm not. Prior to this, I wouldn't even classify myself as a runner per se. I'm a lifelong athlete. I used to compete internationally on the Canadian national water polo team. So I'm a swimmer by trade through and through, but I'd only ever run one marathon, and that was 14 years ago. So I think the last time I even did a 10K was 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was just more that competitive nature in me, and that knowing that I had that tenacity and that drive to do something big like this.
That's a huge undertaking for someone who hadn't run anywhere near that distance before. And you didn't have that much time to prepare. So what's going through your head? You say, Krista, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do this run from sea to sky. What is that process to actually prepare for something like that? Because, I've done a couple of triathlons recently, and that was a lot.
Hmm.
That was nowhere near 125 kilometers. So like, how did you even prepare for something like that?
Yeah. Well, the big thing to backtrack a bit is shot that off the cuff when, we started talking about raising money, right? Then Krista and her sister went down to Florida, got some leading edge treatment, incredibly expensive. I believe it was around 75,000 per treatment, only to find out that she needed to have 2 or 3 treatments total, something that they couldn't afford to do as a family. And when they called me down in Florida, after the first treatment, and it went well. Doctor said, the procedure went exactly as planned. They heard a lot of stories about, other cancer patients in remission due to this treatment. They were in tears, basically, and, you know, asking me if I would commit to that one statement that I made on a phone call several weeks earlier. And, you know, the making the decision to commit to this was based around integrity and being integral with my word. So when I said that, I meant it. And there was really no way that I was going to back out after that. But, we had discussed, how much money do we have to raise? And they said 125,000. I said, well, that's quite the coincidence. It's 125 kilometers I'd have to run. And very next morning after that phone call while they were in Florida, post-treatment, Top Gun anthem song came on, and I was like, "Let's fucking go. Let's do this." And, I sent them a message, and yeah, it was everyone was overjoyed that we had made this verbal commitment to do this, and now it was time to get serious on how we were gonna achieve it, right? Looking back now, I feel like we were dreaming the improbable, and so how are we gonna make that possible, right? In such a short period of time.
Yeah, that's a beautiful gesture of your kindness and just a representation of who you are. And as you mentioned, you have this competitive nature to you. So I get that you want to do something altruistic. You wanted to help your friend Krista. How much of it was wanting to help her and wanting to prove yourself that you could?
I love that. So after reflecting on it, we had about 90 to 100 days to ramp up the training, right? It was the RBC Grand Fondo that heard about our story, and that's North America's largest cycling race, the Sea to Sky Highway, the same route that I had committed to, and they had asked me to be the first ever runner after 15 years. So that means that I had to bump up the training to September 6th, which was 3 weeks earlier than what I had anticipated originally, what I had agreed with Krista. That all said, when we ramped up the running and the training for this, it was about 10 days into the running when I was starting to run like 20, 30K runs. It ramped up really quick. When I recognized that I was doing this for something much bigger than just Krista, that there was a redemption around this. There was a feeling of like, I need to do this for myself and to prove to myself and possibly the world that this is the person I am. And when I commit to hard things, I know what I'm capable of and achieving, right? And there was no one getting me in the way of me doing this, right? This is Matt against the road, and that's it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, something you shared with me before we got on was your coach quit
Hmm.
just a few weeks into it when she thought that you weren't going to be able to do it.
Yeah, there was a 2-time ultra marathoner of the year I had reached out to, recommended. I asked her if, she could coach me. She had committed to that. And then only about a week in, she had, reached back out and said, I don't have the capacity to, make you successful in this, and believe it was like the short period of time that we had to ramp up, right? A typical marathon program, one marathon program, is anywhere between 6 months to a year. And we were doing over 3 marathons. Yeah.
Wow.
And within 90 days.
Wow.
So, yeah, but when you embark on something and doing something hard like that, and again, being integral with my word, there was no way that I was going to shift and quit on this commitment that I made, not only to Krista, but to myself.
Yeah. The commitment you made to yourself. So, what part of you, which version of you did you commit to prove that you can do this? And I asked this question from a place of when I committed to do my first triathlon, it was It was to help the 8-year-old little boy inside of me who almost drowned in Lake Ontario, prove to him that he could do it. It was the version of me who never got picked for sports, was always the last kid standing there getting laughed at. I did my triathlon at 50 for those younger parts of me that never felt good enough, never felt capable, and was too scared to ever do anything like that before. So which version of Maddie did you commit to doing this for?
Yeah, you know what? I think that there's so many through lines to what you just shared, Zarg. The inner child and all those like, per se traumas over the years that you experience as a young kid, in your teenage years, even in your 20s. For me, for this run specifically, the redemption element was around some adversity that I went through in business 5 years ago.
Okay.
So 5 years ago, had a startup, raised a ton of money. Everything seemingly was going incredibly well. And then it was met with a lot of headwinds within the industry that I was in, shareholder revolt. There was just a lot of adversity and drama, and that questioned my self-worth. And, people were very judgmental, and when you're challenged with difference of opinions and all these different voices, and I felt like really defeated. I felt defeated about my decision making. I was paralyzed in any capacity in my life, and my self-worth out of anything and confidence was completely diminished.
Okay.
And I recognized over time that was just other people's opinions of me. That wasn't who I was as a human, and that wasn't my character. And when I started embarking on this training of this run and recognized, wow, I said yes to this, not just for Krista, yeah, as a force of good and to change the world and save a life's friend, like a friend's life, for sure. But at the end of the day, I knew that the commitment to this was the redemption of who I was 5 years ago and building back that confidence and self-worth that I know that I had prior to all that adversity.
Yeah, and that's so powerful because a lot of people, especially in the last few years with COVID and the pandemic, their businesses have got wiped out, their relationships have ended, they've experienced health issues, and it takes the wind out of their sails, and they just never pick up that momentum again. And that's why I think your story is not just a beautiful example of what kindness can create in the world, but also how at any point in time we can choose to change our circumstances. That we can't control what happens in life. The only thing we can control is how we choose to respond to that. And what really inspires me with your story is the resilience and the tenacity that you continue to cultivate within yourself, even when people told you can't do it, even when your coach quit, even when you faced other challenges in your life that would have taken most people out. You continue to lean on, you continue to run and climb that mountain, literally. And I think right now, one of the things that's really missing in society, especially in masculinity, is the integrity and the resilience to do the hard things for what's right, choosing to put yourself out there, even when there may not seemingly be any upfront reward for us, because I'm sure a lot of what you're speaking to now, what you've taken away from this experience, you probably didn't realize till after you said
all the gold comes after, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think, your story and who you are is a beautiful and powerful example for men to choose the hard things, even when it scares the shit out of them, to say yes, even when they don't know what the outcome is going to look like. Because I think we'd be living in a very different world if more men were willing to lean into the unknown and have that resilience and the tenacity that you've cultivated.
Yeah. And you know what, to that point, Zark, is that you're not going to build that resilience unless you do hard things. It's a muscle that you have to work.
Yeah.
Right. And that could be from like resisting of picking up that cookie late at night, those subtle little things, doing that extra rep in the gym, which you know everything about, like those choices that we make to do the things that you resist to do is where the gold comes from. Right. And I heard this recently that one of the greatest acts of vulnerability is getting on the start line. You know why?
Yeah.
Because when you step on that start line of any race, there is fear of failure, fear of judgment, all of that. And if you can just get there, that's
You've already won.
where the win is,
Yeah.
right?
And what I love about witnessing your journey, even though I just, was catching it on social media, and of course we have some mutual friends, is who you've inspired by your way of accomplishing something so profound. My dear friend David Binns, who did his run facing ultra, you inspired him across country, to commit to his run, I think of 75
Yeah.
kilometers. And, being very close to David, I know the personal transformation mentally, emotionally, physically that he went through by way of what you demonstrated to the world. So I just want to acknowledge you for
Oh,
that first off.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I get goosebumps
Yeah.
when this comes up
Yeah.
because ever since the run, so we're, recording this now, it's been almost 3 months or just over 3 months since the run. When people ask me what was the biggest shock, unequivocally, without hesitation, I always say that I underestimated the amount of people that it would inspire far and wide.
Yeah.
And now, fast forward, not only David, but there's another guy in New York that's running 101 miles for an aunt of cancer. There's countless people that have reached out to me that said they're running a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, or a marathon because of me. I had like 650 messages
Wow.
from different people right when I finished the run telling me how inspiring and motivating and what a legend and all this stuff. This is where I completely overlooked the ripple effect of what it could do to society,
Yeah.
right? And this is what the magic is.
And it means more than any trophy, means more than any, maybe compensation you might have received. Like what you were rewarded with is true fulfillment that you'll take to your grave with you, right? You've now created this legacy unintentionally.
Yeah.
You just said yes to doing something for a friend out of generosity and kindness. And as a result, I'm sure this has changed the trajectory of your life.
Oh, completely. Who I am as a person, and what I believe my character is, right? Or like I'm the main character in this, in this movie, right? And I'm doing main character shit.
Yeah.
And it really reminds you who you are as a person when you commit to something like this, because no one can say otherwise, right? In the deepest part of your heart and soul of like what you can achieve. And it's like, our minds are our only limits.
Yeah.
That's it.
And, your demonstration of resilience and tenacity and choosing to do the hard thing, I think it's such a necessary example right now. And I'm going to speak to men specifically because I feel men have become very soft. I feel like we live in a soft society, in a world where everything is readily available. We don't have to go out and hunt and kill anymore. A lot of jobs are very like chill, relax, work from home, with the, content or creative space. A lot of people I feel have just become very passive, and they don't need to do hard things anymore because in many ways, life isn't that hard as far as needing to do, physical things, needing to do things that really push them out of their comfort zone. And that's why I think whether it be ice baths, whether it be committing to a run or a triathlon or whatever it is, I think it's so important that as men, we choose to do difficult things that test our character, that push us to that edge of wanting to give up, wanting to break down, but still saying, fuck it, I got more, I can do this. Because it's in those moments where you have a choice to give up and turn around or keep going that you are preparing yourself for the bigger challenges that lay ahead. And as a man, to be a provider, to be a protector, to be the example, to have your woman, your partner feel safe. She wants to know that when shit hits the fan, you stand up and you're ready to keep going.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, an element in masculinity that's missing. And again, it doesn't have to be running 125 kilometers. It just has to be
the ability to do hard things, really, at the end of the day.
And show it up with integrity.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. Because, as I said earlier, it's this muscle that you have to work, right? And it's transferable across any elements of life. So, the vehicle of hard things that I chose was to run 125 kilometers in this season and chapter of my life. But realistically, that could be any kind of vehicle
Mhm.
per se, right? And if you choose to embark on hard things, you're going to have that resilience that can be transferred
Yeah.
to in your marriage,
Mhm.
in financial stresses, all these things. You build this capacity to lead through the adversity,
Mhm.
and you can be there for your partner,
Mhm.
right?
And while going through that adversity, your limiting beliefs,
Mhm.
your insecurities, the parts of your shadow that you neglect and suppressed and numb yourself from start to show up,
Mhm.
right? So I'm curious to know, as you were preparing, as you're running, you're out there for hours and hours on the road at time. Like what darkness came up for you?
Yeah, there's a special little story that I'll share, part of the run. So it was 125 kilometers. It was uphill. We left at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, right? And the reason why we left at 2 in the afternoon is because I had to finish the run right prior, 15 minutes prior to all the pro riders coming in on the Saturday morning. So I was running 18 hours through the night.
Wow.
Okay. So not only, some people reflected back on me like, yeah, okay, you're running an ultra marathon. Yeah. Okay. And it's uphill. Okay. Check box. Oh, it's by yourself. Yeah. There's no pacers. There's no checkpoints. There's no nothing. And it's all the way through the dark. So I ran 9 hours in darkness, right? The longest distance that I had run training and leading up to this ever, in fact,
Mhm.
was 54 kilometers. That was the longest one bout of distance.
Wow.
And so I'm doing over double that. So yeah, it was at 4 in the morning when I was around the 90-kilometer mark, some 100-kilometer mark. And that's when shit got tough, right? It was already 8 hours of darkness. The sun wasn't up yet. I had gone the longest distance so far. Things started to hurt, right? I had done an enormous amount of uphill, but also a ton of downhill, which was really hard on the joints.
Mhm.
And that's where I really had to dig deep. I had a support vehicle that were along for the ride. I had a lot of people in my life that flew in from out of town, whether it be New York, Toronto, Virginia. And there was a couple of those people, along with my medic staff and my performance coach and all that. They were all in the vehicle. But that vehicle was 5 kilometers up from where I was running. It was like kind of this leapfrog. I'd run 5 kilometers, catch up, get my fuel, and then they'd drive 5 kilometers. And so we'd always have that gap. Anyways, it was at that time in the morning when a song came on. It was St. Elmo's Fire, actually, Man in Motion.
Yeah.
And my doctor that was on board is actually the head of ICU, intensive care unit, in the entire province. And he's seen all of it. He's seen everyone on life support daily. And he said that it was the most magical, inspiring moment that he had witnessed, that it was like a phoenix rising when my shoulders popped back and I was fully depleted. And then all of a sudden the song came on and I just was inspired and envisioned myself crossing that finish line
Mm.
in only hours away. And that I was doing this for Krista and
Mm.
for myself, and we were going to get the job done.
Mm.
And it was like a phoenix rising. And it was this like new life, and the birth had happened on the road. And it was like, it put some people in my support vehicle in tears. But it was a moment. And it was like this mental fortitude that you have to find and you have to dig in the darkest moments to get it done.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where does this competitive nature come from within you? Because not everybody has it,
Mhm.
but there's something within you that had you choose at a young age that you needed to prove yourself.
Yeah. You know what? This has been a big reflection over the last couple months. And there was a, special moment during the run as well, but I was born an identical twin.
Mhm.
So, um,
Was your brother born before you?
22 minutes before.
Okay.
Yeah. And identical twin growing up. So those that are multiple,
Mhm.
triplet and twin, whatever, many of you would probably experience that you're compared constantly,
Mhm.
right? So at the early age of like 3 and 4 years old, I remember being compared, right? It's just natural human
What
nature.
are some of the messages that come up for you?
Yeah, like as a young, like, why did so and so do this or he's not doing that or, like just comparing about like, if you did something wrong, right? Lessons,
Mhm.
right? Also like witnessing like your twin getting punished or you getting punished. Um, in school, it was constant, right? It was like you'd bring back the report card and it's just like, why did you get the B or, why do you have a C minus,
Mhm.
right? At the early age. And in fact, in my elementary school years, I was an okay student, right? Like, of course, elementary school, it's like in the big picture of things, I'm not a huge believer in it,
Mhm.
right? Like it's good structure for kids, but where does the academics, how important is it at that age, right? But nonetheless, it was like a C student. I remember coming home and my dad was like, "This is unacceptable,"
Mm.
and it was the two of us, and we were getting compared
So was
about.
your brother typically doing better
Yeah,
instead?
I think it varied. It varied on like the years and different report cards and what have you, right? But we were constantly compared. And
Mhm.
when you look at sport, even, I've been a lifelong athlete, but we were doing multiple sports at a young age. And it was like, oh yeah, one of us made the A team, the other one didn't. Or even worse is that coaches would not divide us. So one of them had the ability and the skill to make the A team, but because the other one didn't, we both made the B team.
Got it.
So then there became this like little bit of tension,
Mm.
even at a young age. Like, why am I getting held back? Right. And so this competitive nature, just like I was born with it.
Got it.
Right. And throughout all my childhood into my teens,
Mm.
that's what led both of us
Mhm.
actually
Mhm.
to excel in academics.
Yeah.
I got straight A's all the way through high school. I got an unconditional scholarship to any university in Canada. Um, that's what created who I was.
Mm.
Ended up making the national team, which was a long shot early on, but I was so competitive, and we both were,
Mhm.
to have that drive to compete at a high level.
So I disagree. I don't believe you're born with it. What I do believe is that you were born into a dynamic where you were kind of positioned
Yeah, well said. Yeah,
against, not against your brother, but in comparison to
yeah,
your brother, that had you, wanting your dad's approval,
uh-huh.
wanting to prove to the coach you are good enough,
Mhm.
and, developing that competitive characteristic to prove yourself. And I share this because I can relate. I was not athletic. I did not get picked for any teams. And it's what inspired me to go to the gym and to compete with myself and compete with others to show them how cool I could be, how fit I could be, how successful I could be, because I wasn't growing up, right?
Mhm.
So I can look back now and see what would have been helpful for me, like what would have made the difference
Mhm.
that would have allowed me to have more confidence and
Self-worth?
self-worth. So my question for you is, let's say you have twin sons,
Mhm.
one day when you have your children, what will you say and do different for them?
Yeah, obviously on the spot, but one thing that really resonates is like that you matter,
Mm.
right? They both matter in their own power,
Yeah.
right? That they're both worthy of their own gifts
Mm.
and their own talents. And you're different people.
Mhm.
And we do have different personalities and we show up differently online, but we were born in the same environment. So we do have a lot of the similar beliefs,
Mhm.
but just knowing that we have our own independence is big, right? And they're both worthy in their own capacity. That's the biggest thing. And I think even as men, as adults, we choose to be on the more vulnerable side
Mhm.
and lean into that. And it's only like now, and there's still so much more work to do, but I'm understanding what I'm worthy of
Mhm.
and who I am and what my character is. This is 43 years in the making, right?
I hear you.
And it's just like we're still a work in progress.
Mhm.
But that worthiness piece and that like every child matters and they all have their own gifts.
Yeah.
And it's not about being compared,
Mhm.
right? because if we can own our own power, I think that's where we can really live a fulfilled life.
Absolutely. And I feel that when we can embrace our inherent gifts and not disregard them because we don't have other qualities that maybe our
Hmm.
siblings possess that we lack, when we can really acknowledge what we are good at that makes us unique and then nourish that,
Hmm.
cultivate and develop that, that's where we are able to fully lean into whatever God-given talent we have that allows us to
Hmm.
rise above. And I feel that that self-sabotage, those limiting beliefs, all the things that we tell ourselves rooted in those childhood experiences when dad didn't give me the high five because I got the B minus or whatever, all of that plays such a pivotal role in who we become as men. And I, share just from sense of the context of I have a father who wasn't a great role model, didn't teach me sports, didn't really like kind of
Hmm.
pass on healthy, masculine qualities to me, and it's what I've had to cultivate and develop as an adult in my personal development journey, really reaching a lot of success and checking a lot of boxes, but then at 40 realizing like, okay, I've spent, the better half of 2 decades building success and wealth to make the 8-year-old boy in me feel better
Hmm.
about himself. And I think it's so important that for all the fathers out there and the mothers out there to whatever your child is and isn't good at, to just, as you said, accept them. You matter.
Hmm.
Let them embrace their flaws and let them know like what you're going through isn't forever, and
Hmm.
and that, you know, they can truly be anyone they want to be when they can see the potential of
Hmm.
who they
Who they are.
who they are. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
I love that, I love that. And you know what? It's people like you, who really lean into this, Zark. I commend you, and I see
Thank you.
everything how you're leading,
Mhm.
a lot of men
Mhm.
to be vulnerable and to really look inward and discover who they
Yeah.
are. And we have the tools now,
Yeah.
right? Our parents didn't have the tools.
Mhm.
We weren't nearly as connected
Mhm.
globally as we are now, right? And now they're at our fingertips. So, I commend you, and
Mhm.
I
Thank
empower
you.
other men
Yeah.
to lean into those tools.
Yeah, because I do believe first off, thank you for that acknowledgement. I
Mhm.
appreciate it because I never used to be vulnerable. I never used to put my shit out there because I was like the cool club guy. Like I want everybody to see me in my Gucci suit, my fancy car, and like I would
But
not.
that was that inner child,
That was it in our
right?
child who, yeah, needed to show to everybody,
Mhm.
look how cool I can
Look
be
how
now,
much
right?
I matter.
And I believe we are the generation to break this generational pattern of our fathers didn't cry or express themselves or ask for help. Our grandfathers didn't, our great grandfathers didn't. And there's a lineage of men who did not express himself, did not ask for help, kept everything bottled up and pushed down. And our fathers didn't have the tools we have today. They didn't have podcasts and they didn't have Landmark or all these other, coaching programs
Mhm,
and therapists and all the things that we now have access to that are allowing us to actually express ourselves. We as men now have permission to talk about these things. Whereas
mhm,
30 or 40, 50 years ago, you talked about your feelings. If you tried to
mhm,
be vulnerable, you'd get ridiculed, you'd get laughed at, you get
mhm,
ostracized. So it's like only in the past 30 years have men even been given permission to open up and share.
mhm,
So I can look at my father and understand why he didn't talk to me about things like I'm proud of you, or I love you,
mhm,
or how can I help you? These small little things that a boy needs from his father,
mhm,
I didn't get because my father didn't get it from his father. So I don't blame him. But what I do recognize is what I didn't get that would have made a difference that I know I'm going to pass on to my child. That's why I asked you, like,
mhm,
what would you say to your twin boys? Because there are things that you needed to hear as a
mhm,
young boy, both you and your brother, that would have really made a difference. That being said, I'm grateful for the way everything went down. I'm grateful that I was competitive and I needed to prove myself to the world because I built a big, beautiful, glamorous life. But it's going to get to a point where one day you wake up and you realize that person you've become, that false self that you developed, is actually the guy in the way of you having what you truly want.
yeah,
And that is the day where you have a choice to say, okay, am I willing to shine a light in the shadows to see what it is I'm hiding from?
mhm,
Am I willing to face that part of me that I want the world to not see. And that is the beginning of living your true life.
Yeah, your purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that if we circle it back to the run, it was like me understanding at that point in my life, like, what is my purpose here?
Yeah.
Right. I shared with you briefly that I was going through a lot of turbulence, right? When I committed to that run, it was 2 weeks later that my marriage was falling apart.
Mhm.
I witnessed my wife like walk out the door
Wow.
and, questioning spiritually.
Mhm.
Like physically is one thing that I committed to running 125K within 90 days of training.
Mhm.
Mentally, right? The mental fortitude that took. But then if we think about like the emotional, spiritual side of things, like
Yeah.
I'm sitting there questioning, like, why am I doing this?
Mm.
Like, am I doing this like for a friend that I hadn't talked to for 20 years? Or am I doing it for some other purpose?
Yeah.
And when I recognized it was more for me
Mhm.
and for my self-worth and my confidence,
Mhm.
then it was like, there's no way that I'm getting pushed off this path.
Yeah.
And I think that we can, as men, as we age, and we can be aware of, how we move through life,
Mhm.
and we can really lean into those gifts that we're given and understand what our purpose is. It's times like this that we can make the right decision, if you will.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And as I hear you share that, what comes to mind is, you've heard that uh, your pain is your purpose,
Mhm.
and even though you said yes to the race, from the kindness of your heart to help Krista, you didn't realize that you needed this race more than she did.
Mhm.
And through that journey, you discovered that the pain that's coming up for you, your need to prove yourself, your need to rise above your own limitations is now having this ripple effect of inspiring other people like
Mm.
David and like so many others to question their own purpose and to be willing to look into their own wounds. And I think that is, really the true trophy, the true
Mhm.
takeaway from all of this, right? Because that's not something we would initially think about in
Mhm.
in saying yes to something like that. So it is really a beautiful testament to what can happen when you say yes in life, because something within you said yes. Something
Mhm.
just had you say, I'm in. And I believe, God doesn't give us any challenges that we can't overcome,
Mhm.
and that we will be given adversity and struggles and life altering circumstances when it's time for us to grow and evolve.
Mhm.
So I'm curious to know, why do you think God, source, universe, whatever you believe in, gave you the circumstance of your coach quitting, your wife leaving, and everything else that's transpired? Reflecting on that now, what do you think God is trying to tell you?
Wow. We went pretty deep on like all like purpose and
Mm.
that inner child stuff. But if I were to look back at a more like higher level for like, for looking at the run as a whole, right? When I committed to that and then my marriage falling apart, well, you know, think about this. I was doing 15 hours of running every single week,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
We're talking about 2 6-hour long runs every single week for weeks on end throughout the entire summer. Well, that's an opportunity to go inward
Mhm. Yeah.
and to really
Mhm.
reflect, right? How often nowadays do we even take more than 15 minutes out of our day
Mhm.
with no digital, media or phones or TVs or whatever, right? To really sync with our thoughts and sit with them, right? And that's where you can actually mine for like, wow,
Mhm.
what am I doing? How am I going to get through this? What is God telling me? Why? Like, all of these questions came up,
Yeah.
right? And I had that opportunity to really reflect on who Matt is as a human,
Mm.
right? And what my purpose is. And so there was adversity and these challenges, but I wholeheartedly believe if I didn't commit to that run, I wouldn't be on the other side of this marriage
Mhm.
in, the state that I'm in,
Mhm.
right? Because it was like therapy
Yeah.
for 3 months straight,
Yeah.
right?
Do you think you would still be in the marriage if you didn't commit to the run?
No, I remember in the early days, and I honor and respect her. I love her. Um, Early days, I was almost getting, questioned, why am I doing this? And, why for a friend? And
Mhm.
it felt like it was a reason to leave,
Mm.
but that wasn't the case,
Okay.
and we would be in the exact same position.
Mm.
Like I'm confident of it.
Okay.
And so my decision to stay the course was a big decision, but looking back, it was the right decision,
Okay.
right? Because
Yeah.
I stayed true to my purpose and what God's plan was for me,
Yes.
right? And no matter what, if that was the straw that broke the camel's back in our marriage, well, you know what? Our marriage wasn't strong enough to begin with,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So I continued down that road after questioning, days on end,
Mhm.
should I still do this?
Yeah.
And I stayed the course. And I know that it was the right decision now, looking back.
Do you think there is a level of commitment and a version of you that was showing up to take on this run that you weren't bringing to your marriage?
Yeah, I think that I played a role, as we do in partnerships and marriages,
Mm.
and it was complacent,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And took it for granted.
Okay.
And, when you're living the day to day and you have a beautiful marriage and a beautiful wife and you have a dog and,
Mhm.
every seemingly feels fine
Yeah.
and good,
Mhm.
but it wasn't great,
Okay.
right? And I think that I became complacent in our marriage when I was very proactive in other areas of my life,
Right.
whether that be my health,
Mhm.
my fitness, my business, whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so I think for the men out there, it's like, taking charge, taking the lead, having that masculine,
Yeah.
element in, energy in the marriage to really lead
Yeah.
and lead in the partnership,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean necessarily being the breadwinner or what have you. That means like actually making decisions purposefully, right? With intention and knowing that you're like advancing that partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you saying really showing up in your masculine energy of being the provider, protector, being the one to create that strong frame
Mhm.
that allows you to fully show up for your partner.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned, during those runs, you had 6 hours to yourself to think, to
Mm.
reflect, to go inwards. Who are you now as a result of that deep therapy on the road? What are some of the lessons that you've learned that can now impact your life in a different way?
Mhm. Well, I think without a doubt that one of the big lessons is around self-worth,
Mm.
right? And no one can tell you who you are, right? As a human. And, I was casted with, the business was failing 5 years ago and there was this judgment and there's all these voices and opinions and what have you. And, like I shared earlier, my confidence and my self-worth was depleted and to completely diminished, it felt like looking back. But when you do something like this, when you reflect on who you are as a human, and when I embarked on that hard thing to run 125 kilometers, but also like through all that other turbulence and to stay the course, like I can do hard shit, right? And no one can question me as a person, my integrity of how I show up from my friends,
Mhm.
from my family, and from myself,
Mm.
right? And at the end of the run, one of the things that I've learned, and literally as I ran through that finish line, is like I think Simone Biles said it best. She's the goat of gymnastics. Like fuck around and find out.
Mhm.
And it's just like literally that was the feeling that I got when I finished it. And that isn't in a like an ego way. That is like wholeheartedly like, no, no one can tell me who I am as a person.
Yeah.
Right? Only I know who I am,
Yeah.
and I'm going to show up in this world for the character that I want to play.
Yeah. But you choose to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, as I imagine you crossing that finish line, I could see this transmutation of the emotions of guilt and shame from a business failing, from marriage failing, for all the things that didn't work out. The minute you cross that finish line, those emotions transmuted from guilt to gratitude to optimism to
Yeah.
a new level of self-worth.
100%. You know, one of the qualities of a resilient leader, especially through adversity, is optimism,
Yes.
right? And having the belief that, you know, everything's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And now when you look at that and I look back and the journey of even in 90 days,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
all the stuff that I went through, all the turbulence, all the doubters, all the people. I had countless people, Zark, that told me that I wouldn't be able to ramp up my training in time, you know, hence the coach quitting. But multiple other people said I'd get injured in that short period of time, that I couldn't raise that amount of money, you know, 125 grand within, you know, a couple months. Do it next year. You're not going to be able to integrate into the RBC Grand Fondo. There were so many people that casted their opinions. And guess what? I stayed the course and we crushed every single element of that. I walked away essentially injury free. I completed the run. You know, gross, we raised like over $200,000 within a matter of months,
Yeah.
right? Like we achieved the improbable. But at the end of it, it's because that's because I remained optimistic about the outcome. And I envisioned myself crossing that finish line and giving a massive hug to Krista,
Mm-hmm.
the root cause of why I originally did this. And that's what happened.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Mhm.
And just a testament to the power of visualization and about believing in yourself
Mhm.
and about seeing yourself crossing that finish line and choosing to continue being that version of you every freaking day while
Mhm.
you're training. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm feeling inspired, and I'm going to be pushing to do my first High Rocks race in April.
I just did one.
Yeah, oh yeah. Which one do you do?
Yeah, I did Dallas. I
Oh,
was,
okay.
you know, it was one of the most sought after events because there was some of the industry titans that were competing in the pro division.
Cool.
Yeah, I had Nick Barr and
Oh,
Jason Kalipa and Matt Troy and all these guys. So I ended up getting an entry to the pro division, and yeah, it was a blast.
amazing. Well, I'll have to hit you up for some High Rocks training tips because I'm competing in the one in April in Miami.
Love it.
So I'm going to start. I'm going to actually start training next week. You know, New Year's week. Gonna find a High Rocks gym here and start getting it in.
Awesome, brother.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I mean, your journey, this experience, has been so inspiring for myself and so many others, and I have no doubt what you've been through has prepared you, has developed you to be this new version of you. And you have some new ventures. You have some new things that you're up to that I'd love to you to share more about because obviously we have our dear friend in common, Mr. Spencer Copin, who has helped me to optimize
Mhm.
my health and help prepare me also for my triathlons. So yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you got going on with Opscotch and what this new chapter has opened up in your life.
Yeah. So, you know, 2 years ago, founded a company called Opscotch. I like to say it's a modern health company that gives people the knowledge and tools to optimize their health. Uh, Business partner, Spencer Coppin, he's been doing longevity medicine, as you know, Zark, since before it was even cool.
Mhm.
I think he's been doing it for like 17 years now, something like that,
Mhm.
and just really working on optimizing people's health and that proactive preventative health element. You know, at the end of the day, that's what enabled me to make that impromptu decision off the cuff
Mhm.
to run 125 kilometers without even running.
Mm.
It was my health that I knew that would give me the ability to complete something like that. And so with Opscotch, that's what we prioritize. We prioritize blood work, you know, looking at deficiencies in blood biomarkers, helping people optimize them into like really tight ranges, getting them on the podium, if you will. You know, like we don't want people just to be air quote healthy. We want them to be optimal. So we have blood work, at home test kits. We have a really focused lineup of supplements. Our beef protein is arguably our hero product. Um, and yeah, that we have a community that we curate and coach. Yeah, overall, it's just like helping people in their path to optimal health. So that's a big focus of mine. You know, continuing to compete and challenge myself from a physical standpoint, but also a mental standpoint.
Mhm.
I'm gonna compete in another High Rocks in 2025. Um, But yeah, just like continuing to lean into areas where I see that there's friction and resistance, because I know that on the other side of whatever that friction or resistance is, there's going to be even more gold,
Yeah.
and that's going to allow me to grow. And that's what it's all about.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And, I think you and Spencer on something that obviously it's where all the smart money is going right now. What do people want? They want to live a longer life. They want to live a healthier life. And people are now starting to understand this difference between health span or lifespan and health span, right? And the technology and the supplements and just the protocols that are available today is all cutting edge. And, 5 years ago, we didn't know about half this stuff. So it's amazing to see where life longevity and health optimization is going.
Big time, big
Yeah,
time.
and I'm sure, no doubt, you being a walking billboard for optimal health, doing things like the Project 125 and High Rocks and everything else is amazing and inspiring, because I'm sure there's many men watching this who are like, wow, this guy's 43, and I'm proud to say that me doing a triathlon at 50, I did something at 50 I couldn't do in my 30s. And that's a result of having people like Spencer advise me on what I should and shouldn't be eating, doing my blood work, like really understanding, like, how do I take the best possible care of this machine that I've been gifted.
Oh yeah, like, hey, I competed internationally for the national team, and that was in my 20s, or like even younger, actually, youth national team too. And I'm in better performance and optimal health than I was back then, right? Because I have the knowledge and the tools at my fingertips. I actually know from a perspective of data, where my health is at, right? I took agency over my own health. I'm not relying on the traditional medical system, right? I can actually navigate and, pull certain levers to be in that peak performance state. So
Yeah, love that. And that's because you keep choosing to push yourself and keep choosing to see where is there room to grow, even if it's just a 1-2% increment, where is that potential, the possibility.
yeah, and people should know that it's, know by now that there's no magic pill, right? It's about getting on that start line, like we said. Get on the start line and, commit to something. And whether that's your health or something physically demanding or even mentally challenging, get on that start line and make that commitment for anyone, mostly yourself.
Love that. I think that's a beautiful message to wrap this up with. I think it is the takeaway that anybody listening or watching this can benefit from, especially with, the new year around the corner. I mean, by the time this airs, it'll already be 2025. But, as we have this new year ahead of us with infinite possibility, do you choose to be complacent and have a repeat of 2024? Or are you willing to ask yourself, where could I be 5% better? If I was 5% better in my health, 5% better in my relationships, 5% better in my spiritual practice, what would that look like, right? And that's all it is. Get to the start line, start running, and see what the universe opens up for you, because your journey is a beautiful example as to what happens in life when you say yes and you lean in.
Amen. Amen.
Well,
Thanks, brother.
Thanks for being here, my friend. I'm going to put all your information in the show notes. So anybody who wants to reach out, learn more about Opscotch, learn more about Project 125, just keep tabs on what you got going on. I'm sure you'll be inspiring many viewers and listeners here. And just want to thank you for your time, for being here in Toronto to share your journey. If you enjoyed this podcast and you learned something valuable, then please hit subscribe so you don't miss the future episodes. I'd love it if you share this with a friend and leave us a review. Your feedback is so important to our growth. Thank you for supporting the Path to Purpose podcast. I appreciate you. I'll see you in the next episode.